Hey, thanks for joining me again as we continue to go through the book of Proverbs together. Let's not forget that we're clinging to the promise of Proverbs chapter 1, that whoever listens to wisdom will dwell securely, will be at ease, and will not dread disaster. And so that's what we're after. Proverbs chapter 5 is where we are. And I want you to go ahead and look at Proverbs chapter 5 and verse 3. It says, "For the lips of the forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil." You'll quickly realize that this chapter is specifically addressing the sin of adultery, the sin of sexual sin and lust. That's absolutely what's going on in this chapter. But I want you to notice something about the nature of sin, not just the sin of adultery, but all sin, all foolishness for that matter. And this was brought to my attention. I was reminded of this just last night in a discipleship group with a couple other guys that I'm in. And one of the guys in the group made the point that sin is being distracted away from what God has called us to. It's distraction from God's good and perfect design. And that's for all of our life, particularly as it applies in Proverbs 5 is our sexuality, that God has a perfect design for that, and that sin comes to us in terms here of a forbidden woman. It's like honey. It's smoother than oil. It's sweet to the taste, and it's tempting, and it's distracting you away from reality with these temptations. With these sweet things that just will not produce what you think they will produce. And so notice this about sin. Sin is a distraction away from God's design. Proverbs chapter 5, particularly about sexuality, it goes on to say that drink water from your own cistern. Should your springs be scattered abroad, it says in verse 16, streams of water in the streets, let them be for yourself alone and not for strangers with you. And so what Solomon is talking about here is that the only proper expression for sexuality is within the confines of marriage. That's God's design for sexuality. And so he's saying, don't be distracted of things around you. Now here's the deal. In this time that we're living in right now, not just our culture, but our current context of being socially isolated, you're going to be tempted and distracted in all sorts of ways. Don't bite. Don't bite the lure. It will leave you. Listen to what it says. Her feet go down to death, and her steps follow the path to Sheol. It will not give what it promises. The only way that sexuality will give what it promises is within the confines of marriage. Now, there's another thing that pops out to me here. It's in verse 20, where it says, "Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman?" And right before that, it says, "Be intoxicated with the wife of your youth." So maybe here's the application for some of you guys out there. You need, at this time where you're probably spending more time with your wife than you maybe have in a long time, is to learn her, is to know her, know how she thinks, know how she feels, and be intoxicated with her. That's a good thing. Intoxication with something else is not good, but to be intoxicated and in love and overwhelmed with your wife, that's a good thing, because marriage is meant to show us the gospel, how God changes our lives. So in your marriage, you have this wonderful picture of what the gospel is like. Be intoxicated with your wife. Maybe here's another application, kind of going away from the text a little bit. But maybe ask yourself during this time, not just as it pertains to marriage and sexuality, but maybe other things of what are you intoxicated with? What overwhelms your thinking and changes the way that you act? Maybe it's in terms of church life. Maybe you've been intoxicated and passionate about the wrong things. Maybe it's at work or in leisure or relationships. I don't know what it is, but you can probably think of some ways, because as we're kind of being weaned off of our normal lives right now, spend this time asking, what am I intoxicated with? What am I overwhelmed with? Are you overwhelmed with the wife of your youth? Are you overwhelmed with the things of God? Don't be distracted. Pursue God's design in all of life, because in that you will find life.